Hello, Grandmasters. Mike from the WCA, Week 3 update, 12 p.m., 2 p.m. I know you're going to spend hours watching this video. Why? Because it's really, really important. The game I'm going to show you guys was super instructive. Super. I mean, if you really learn the points that come out of this video, you're going to be Grandmasters by next week. Of course, that's not true. Study, really pay attention to some of the things that happen in this game. Okay, Dennis with the white pieces playing Benjamin with the black pieces. We have a four knights position in front of us where Dennis plays the move bishop to b5, right? Okay, we've seen this stuff so many times. By now, everybody is familiar that if you put the bishop on c4 in a four knights position, you could get hit with the center fork trick. I'm not going to repeat the center fork trick ideas here. If you don't know this stuff, make sure you talk to me in class. But most of you by now should be familiar with the center fork trick. Okay, so in the four knights, the players put the bishops on these squares. These are very common moves. So it's basically a copycat position. And here, the most common move for white by far is to just castle and then see if black wants to break the symmetry or play symmetrically for a while. It's perfectly fine for black to do different things here. But instead of castling, one of the things that white tries to do here, and I'm going to go back, is what Dennis did to Benjamin. You can try to win this pawn on e5. Well, you're not going to do it now, right? Because you're going to lose the knight. So that was a mouse slip. Anyway, you have to take this knight first, and that's exactly what Dennis did. Dennis takes the knight, and obviously with black, you're going to take this bishop. But how? One opening principle in chess is when you have a choice to capture with pawns in the opening, usually you capture away from the center. In cases like this, why? Make sure you understand why. Because you're in the opening, by taking away from the center, you open lines for your queen and your light squared bishop. That is the whole purpose of the opening, is to get the pieces out, right? If you take towards the center, so in this case, this B pawn just took here, you do get some open lines, but there is a difference. Here you would have to use a rook for this line. Now remember, this is not a minor piece, so rooks usually don't get to come out that quickly in the opening. So even though the line is open, you might not get a great use out of it in the opening. The other line that you open is for the light squared bishop here, and that is a gorgeous diagonal. If you can control that diagonal, you'd be in really good shape. The only problem is white at some point can play d3, and that might shut that bishop out for a while. So that's why in the opening, the players normally take away from the center. So let me show you what happens in case you get this position in one of your games as black and white tries to do what Dennis did to Benjamin. Okay, so it's going to look like this. They're going to give up the bishop to take away the defender of this pawn. Again, in the future, I recommend you take with the D pawn. If they swipe the pawn, it's not for free. Try to remember the move Queen e7, attacking the knight. If the knight moves back, say it goes back to f3, then you do the same trick to white. You give up your bishop for the knight. They'll probably take back away from the center to develop the pieces. And here you can just take with your queen check. And it's a chess game. This is a very, very equal position. Don't be afraid to trade the queens here as black if you have to. The pawn structures are the same. The only difference is you have opposite colored bishops here. So you still have plenty of chess to play. Okay, so here's your move, queen to e7. Okay, try to remember how we're getting here. Queen e7. If they go back, you simply take the knight, and eventually you're going to win this pawn on e4. Okay, they don't have to go back. After you play queen e7, they can protect the knight, and they can do that two different ways. If they play f4, well, how do you win your pawn? You do the same thing. You play bishop takes, pawn takes, and now you can swipe the pawn on e4. Now, this is an interesting moment. Chess players always learn quickly that when the E file opens up and all of these pieces that are on this line belong to the E file, it's kind of a cool position. The two knights are in each other's territory and the two kings are still in the middle. If you castle as white, you have to be ready to trade queens here because black can check you. Okay, look at every check and capture. Ready? Check. Now, you better trade queens here because if you put your king in the corner, you're in trouble. You're going to lose the exchange. And I'm going to make sure that you know what that means, to lose the exchange. Okay, it means rook for minor piece because when the knight checks you, if you move your king back, wow, it looks like I can take a free queen. I don't want a free queen. I want a free king. This is a chance to do the famous smothered checkmate. Mate in 3. Stop the video. Make sure you know how to do this, okay? Very important concept. So pause your video, find mate in 3 for black. Okay, I hope you found this discovered double check. You move the knight. It's a discovery. You see how the queen is now hitting the king? So is the knight. So whenever there's a double check, the king must move. He only has one square, and now it's mate in 2. You find this beautiful queen g1. The rook has to take, which smothers the king. He's completely covered by his own pieces, like in a blanket, and unfortunately, the knight can just jump through all of that stuff. It's checkmate. So after you play queen c5 check, the king goes in the corner. When you play knight f2, in order not to get mated, white has to take the knight with the rook. You simply take with the queen, and black is up some material here, probably on their way to win. Okay, so how did we get here again? Let's go back. You're black. White just took your knight, then they took your pawn. You play queen e7. This was for them protecting the knight with the f pawn. You do the same trick. Bishop takes knight, pawn takes, and grab the pawn in the middle. Now, they can also defend, if we go back, they don't have to go back with their knight. After queen e7, can't they defend with the d pawn? It looks like they can do that too. The difference here, though, is if they play d4 and protect the knight, see the highlight? The knight on c3 is pinned, so you can simply take the e-pawn right away with your knight, and you will get a very balanced position, believe it or not. The only difference that will be there are the bishops of opposite color that can come on the board, because when these things get traded, very often white will be left with a dark squared bishop, and you will have a dark squared bishop with black. Now, let's go back again, and I'm going to keep repeating this. I really, really want to make sure you guys master this. Here's bishop to b4 for black. This is the 4 knights symmetrical. They try to win the pawn by taking your knight. In the future, we're going to take back with the d pawn, and I showed you all the variations of how to get your pawn back as black. Benjamin in the game took with his b pawn. Now, even taking with the b pawn is okay, because once Dennis takes the pawn, you have the same trick. So pause your video if you need to. How would you get your pawn back? Queen e7. And very similarly to the last line, if the knight goes back, we simply take the knight, they take back, queen takes check. And here's a cool line. Let's say they don't want to trade queens and they block with the bishop. This position is very, very playable for black. Let me put a couple of highlights on. Do you see those two bishops? That's one of the big imbalances in this position. And I'm going to write in the blog that what an imbalance is. I want you to get to know that. It's basically any difference in your position in terms of the type of pieces that you have and pawn structure, placement of the rooks. Sometimes, for example, let's say I have two bishops and you have two knights. Technically, we both have 6 points, but that's an imbalance. It's not the same kind of tool. Which is better? You should know the answer to that. It depends on the position. It's also like me asking you, what's a better way to travel? With a car or a bicycle? I didn't give you enough information. If you're in a mountain, having a mountain bike is probably a little better than having a car. But if you have a freeway that you're on and you need to go 60, 70 miles an hour, it's going to be hard to keep up with the bike. You guys with me? I know you are. Okay, now, back to the game. After the pawn was taken, Benjamin was not familiar with this idea Queen e7, and trust me, he's not the only one. That's why I'm making a big deal out of this video. After that pawn disappeared, he put his bishop on b7. And the bishop on b7 doesn't give you quite the same amount because after Dennis's next move, which is a very good one, he played d3. So after the bishop came to b7, Dennis put the pawn on d3, and now Benjamin is going to struggle to win his pawn back. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to flip this board. It looks, boy, it takes a lot of energy to do that. Wow, I have to pick the board up, turn it around, make sure the pieces don't get messed up. I'm getting really good at this. This is what it looked like from White's side. White is up a pawn. After d6, chasing the knight, I like White's idea. Dennis said, hey, you know what? I'm up a pawn. Let's trade some pieces. And here Benjamin makes a big decision, and it's a bit risky. He decides to hit the knight. And I give him credit because he had a long-term plan. He didn't just move the pawn to h5 to chase the knight away. He actually has this idea in mind. See the bishop I'm moving up here? He's going to move this up here at some point and swing it back to this square to attack on this diagonal. So it was kind of a deep move. The only problem in the position, though, is what? Look at the black king, still in the middle of the board. The white king, also in the middle. If he ever castles this way, you'll see that his pawn structure here is kind of neat. If black ends up castling by playing h5, you have to be very, very careful that this pawn doesn't loosen your position too much. Castling the other way might be playable, but there are some holes over here, so that could be risky too. After h5, a capture, recapture, bishop to d2, breaking the pin, and now black moves the bishop again. Does he have a reason? What's the threat? The threat is checkmate. Queen takes pawn is checkmate. So Dennis stops the mate by offering a queen trade. Now, you could mess up White's pawns by making that trade, but I don't really think you can take advantage of this pawn structure so well, especially since White has an extra pawn, and the king is going to be, king may actually be fine right in the middle for a while with all those pawns, but I don't think White would have much trouble playing this position. So he didn't go for that. After queen f3, Benjamin decides to put the queen in. Now, there's a problem with that. If you move the queen deep inside White's territory, what do you think is going to happen? Now, look, I don't blame him. He didn't want to trade queens being down a pawn, but if you put the queen deep inside enemy territory, she's going to get kicked around. Bishop to e3. Queen went to b4, and Dennis simply defends the pawn with his rook. Okay, terrific. Now here comes that maneuver. The bishop is coming around to attack the queen. White castles, and then bishop to g4. The main problem for black in this position is white has accomplished everything they want to do in the opening, which is what? Develop all the minor pieces, connect the rooks, castle the king, use the center pawns. Black has done all of that except for one problem. He's lost a pawn, and his king is still in the middle of the board, which means after queen to g3, what should black do? Should he castle? Probably. You can give it a shot castling here, but you need to watch this queen over here. She's going to get attacked again, and there could be some issues on that side of the board. I'm not sure if Benjamin saw that or not. So he didn't castle. Instead, he played d5. And the risk of playing d5 is you're opening up the game with your king sitting in the middle of the board. Very instructive. Pawn a3 hits the queen. Queen went to b6. And here, Dennis missed the chance to win a piece. What he did was perfectly fine, but pause the video. Show me how white can win a piece here. Okay, the move is knight a4. When you play knight a4, you double attack the queen and the bishop. There are no checks in this position that can get you out of trouble as black, so you see the lines? The bishop and the knight both attack the dark squared bishop. Black is going to lose a piece here. So he missed that. What did he do instead? I like his move. He played pawn takes in the center. Why is Dennis willing to open up the e-file? Because the black king is still sitting on e8, and that's what got Benjamin in trouble here. He tried to cover up in the middle, sacrifice a pawn, and then Dennis sets a really, really deadly trap. This rook is lining right up with the black king. If you're playing black, you're worse here. You're probably losing already, but you need to get that king out of the middle of the board. Instead, he moved his queen again, and he just walked right into a fork. Now, bishop takes c5 is check. That's a free bishop, completely winning. He played b4 instead, forking. Bishop took, pawn took, hitting the queen. The queen went to a3. And I'm going to stop the video here because black's in big trouble. It turns out that black has mate in 4. I want you to pause the video and solve it. It's mate in 4. I'm also going to put this in the blog for you. And also here, if you wanted to win the black queen for free, you could just play what move. Make sure you guys see this. You can just put the bishop here, check. And when the king gets out of check, you just take a free queen. Okay? So from here, you have mate in 4. All right. I will see you, Grandmasters, in class.